Yeah, I mean, when I saw these things, learning, leadership, I was reflecting a bit about the time that I went to school. Now, as you can see, if you look at me, that's a while ago. And I was one of those students, when it was a sunny day, I found it hard to concentrate. So I looked out of the window and saw what was happening and if there was any sort of action. And I sit in an office right now in London. There's a beautiful office right opposite the London Eye. And there's this fantastic green lawn in front of the office. And I have to admit, I haven't talked to my boss about it, but occasionally my thoughts wander away when I see people on a sunny day lying on the lawn and think, what the hell am I doing in this office? So that condition that I had as a kid, joking aside, they probably would call ADHD or something like that today because I had problems concentrating. But occasionally, I came across teachers. And what they taught me, I still remember. Occasionally, I came across teachers who had this capability to walk in the room, talk about a subject, and the time of those Romans suddenly came alive. Do you recognize that? Occasionally, I came across leaders who can even make a subject like math, which, unlike my daughter, is not my natural habitat, math, abstractions. Make it come alive. And I wanted to understand. And that is something that after many years of working, I still feel draws parallels between leadership and teachers. Because again, I've had leaders that allowed me to be and become the best person that I could be. And that's a bit what I want to talk to you about. Because I do believe that if you have such a leader, your capability to learn, to get the best out of yourself, to not only be inspired yourself, but through that inspire others, goes up dramatically. And yet, how many of those do we actually embrace on a day-to-day basis? How many of these fantastic leaders do we have? So in the room, I mean, so how many of you are working for such a fantastic, inspirational leader right now? Just show of hands. That's not bad. You're doing quite good. Now, for those people who actually work, for those people who work for a leader and they're sitting in a room, this is the start of the feedback process. 360 feedback is very modern and transparency is fantastic. So perhaps this is then a thing for a conversation later. But joking aside, no slides, what I want to talk about is this magic of leadership. And what I will try to do, because I really believe when this is about learning, is to convince you that great leaders make you curious. And when you're curious, you want to learn. And when you learn, you get better at what you do. Would you agree? Now, because some of you actually have these great leaders, what would be the attributes of a great leader? I mean, I'm sitting for a room full of experts. So how does this animal look like? Help me a bit. What is a good leader like? Share vision, okay. Inspiring, yes. Care for the others, very good. Charisma, that's an interesting word. So what does it actually mean? Can we grab it? Can you touch it? Is it a bit like soul? Charisma. Inspire. Good. Yeah, very good. Yes. And feedback, very good. High energy. Yeah, is that so? Have some people been inspired by leaders who have not so much high energy? Empowering. But yes, some you can be empowered and quiet as well. Humility, very good. Risk-taking, very good. So the interesting thing is, we actually know how the animal looks like, don't we? Yet why is it so hard? Because in a company like Shell, and this is a small company, we're going through indeed a major transition. I'm looking after the downstream business for those people who have a car and fill up the tank occasionally. I hope you'll visit our sites. That's about 20% of my business. We've got 45,000 sites. We've got 500,000 people working there. And believe me, inspirational leaders in an environment like that is hugely important. And when I look at HR and my team, together we really try to find those leaders. And we learned a few things. There's actually 4 things we found out that some of those great leaders have. And we started to become a bit more curious about what those 4 things are. And I want to share that with you for free. Sort of. Because we're together anyhow. And I have the luxury of opening up this meeting and setting the tone a bit. That growth, it's about performance, because in today's world, you have to perform as well. It's about authenticity. And that's we come back to the extrovert over the introvert and how much that matters. And it's about collaboration. And you can use different words. The thing we learned in Shell, because it's an engineering company, if you have too many of these things, it doesn't work. 12 years ago, I was involved in a project, and we tried to determine the perfect leader. And typical engineering style, we came up with 10 planets. Actually, it became 11. And because of the way I work, when challenged, I probably could find 3 or 4. And the rest I sort of forgot. And we learned through that, because I also promised this morning to talk about things we tried and failed at. If you overdo it, if it's too complex, it doesn't work. Because when you want to have a leadership language, something around this topic, it's so helpful if you do that in a language that is easy, so that people start talking in these words. They start talking about performance or growth or authenticity and collaboration. Because these are things they find in other people. And if you can find these seeds at a relatively early age, you can nurture it, you can grow it, you can make it better. Simple language, emotive language helps to build bridges with different people. Growth, performance, authenticity, and collaboration. Let's start with growth. Who in the room is working in an organization that doesn't want to grow? Good. So, it's important. Now, are there finance people in the room? Finance professional? Okay. Good. That's good. I mean, bear with me. We can talk in the break. I've got some real good friends in finance. I used to run HR for all the global functions, 30,000 people, finance, legal, HR, IT in Shell. Fantastic community. But one of the problems I had with my finance friends is they believe that people wake up in the morning because of a return on average capital employed. And you know what, my friends? They don't. Free cash flow from operations is massively important, but it is not the freaking Mount Kilimanjaro that people want to climb up to. It is not. It will never will be. So leadership and growth is about using a language that is emotive, that connects people's hearts and minds. And I mentioned Mount Kilimanjaro, and I talked yesterday evening to somebody who actually climbed the mountain, because we have company pyramids, and we pay $1 gazillion for people to climb it. And then you have Mount Kilimanjaro, and people pay $5,000 for the luxury to climb to the top. And I find that interesting. And I say to myself, I want leaders who can define in their department a Mount Kilimanjaro. Because those leaders, regardless of what we pay in the job levels in that community, will make people curious on how to get there, because they might want to admire the view, or they just like to do it with a team. So growth and leadership is very much about defining what you do in a language that is emotive, in a way that people want to be part of it. Sounds simple, is not always simple. In my own industry, for years we thought it was enough to be excellent in engineering. And it's only the last year, and I'm really proud of that. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy being in Shell right now. In the transition, we said, no, our Mount Kilimanjaro is being the leader in the provision of sustainable energy solutions. Move from oil and gas into that world. It's difficult, it's exciting. We don't know exactly how to do it. But shoot, it energizes a community. So growth, very important. Second thing is performance. Whether we like it or not, specifically for publicly listed company, every 3 months, you have to show your books. How you're doing. When you have growth plans, are you actually making them happen? We have a lot of shareholder money that the shareholders want to know whether we do the right thing with them. Now, on performance, we found out leaders who drive performance, first and foremost, understand the people that work for them. Now, that sounds very obvious, doesn't it? And I would probably say that in my own discipline, human resources right now, we have, unfortunately, a lot of leaders who are not curious enough about what makes people tick. Would you agree that if you want to get the best performance out of an individual, it is sort of helpful to understand what drives them, what they're excited about, and why 9 out of 10 of conversations that people have, these one-on-ones, whether it's on a phone or face-to-face, do leaders not ask questions? Why do leaders don't set the scene for the individual they're working with to be comfortable? Let me tell you a story. It was about 15 years ago. I worked for a new leader, and the way that collaboration started was not through open resourcing. No, suddenly in my agenda, a 2-hour slot with the CIO at the time in Shell appeared. He had called my PA and just said a 2-hour slot. I was curious, what the hell's happening here? And he showed up at my office and he said, "Can we have a conversation?" I said, "Of course." So we had a conversation. And the conversation was that he asked questions and I gave answers. From where I went to school, what I was excited about, sports, whatever. At the end of a 2-hour conversation, it was very lively. He said, "Would you mind working for me?" That was a new experience. And you know what? That 2-hour investment this man made created a huge social connect, which really helped in the early days of a very difficult job. I walked in the job where we had 10,000 people in IT. We had to reduce by half, spare the details. But he wanted to know who he's going to work with and who was on his team. The second thing he did, whenever he had a meeting with him, come hell or high water, telephones ringing, desk full of paper, when you walked into the room, he actually was there for me. And I'm married to a psychologist, so I got a lot of feedback at home. So when I come home on Friday, when I come home on Friday evening, she wants to talk about what she's done today. So I listen. And she says halfway, "You're not listening." And I said, "What do you mean?" And I repeat what she just said. And she said, "I don't mind that you listened in terms of words, verbally what I said, but it's not what I mean. You're not here for me." And something magic happens when a leadership, and that's related to performance, believe me, when leaders are really curious and take a bit of time. And I know we all have busy days. But is it really true that in a meeting that you cannot spend 2 or 3 minutes asking the individual where they are? When you have a virtual work relations, how difficult is it, if you want to drive performance, if you have an international job, to actually call up the page of the local newspaper of the country that person sits in, so that you know what's happening there? So when I call to my friends in a call out in Houston, I open up the Houston Chronicle. By the way, very interesting when you see their reporting about Brexit, but that's a different conversation. But these few minutes that you invest, and whether it is Australia, where a new political thing might be happening, or something in the climate, or whatever, you suddenly reduce the distance. And performance management, the psychology contract you have with the individual. And I come back to the topic of learning. If you really have a desire to perform well, because you respect the person deeply that you work for, and you're inspired by the growth objectives, you can do things that you never thought would be possible. The third thing is collaboration. I mean, a lot of people, and I've seen it happen in this room, it's quite fascinating actually, and I saw it outside the room even more clearly. People have a tendency to build bridges with people that are similar than they are. It's normal, yeah? So you come from the same country, you come from the same company. Great leaders build bridges with people that are different than they are. And it's a very different sort of collaboration. That sort of collaboration actually requires, again, a level of curiosity about other individuals. But it also requires, and it was nice to see that happen on stage this morning, that you are prepared to understand where your weaknesses are. Great leaders know that they're not perfect in everything. And again, if you would invite my wife, we could have a long conversation about my list. But the serious reality is, also in HR, we have been obsessed with talent, with this idea that we could find Mr. or Mrs. Perfect. I've done it. I mean, I commit to my sins. But I've learned the hard way that great teams are not great teams where you only have heroes. Great teams are great teams because people collaborate and they build bridges with each other because they respect each other's skills. What I learned the hard way, when I took on a big leadership role the first time, I had created a team with mini-me's. Mini-me's. Horrible. Now, it's a bit like, sorry, pissing in your pants, and after a while, in the beginning it feels good, but after a while it doesn't. Yeah, you have the image. So mini-me's. So these were high-energy people, slightly extroverted, not taking life all too serious. And you know what? I was doing a recruitment job. I failed miserably the first quarter to actually deliver on the targets that we've set. People were very inspired. The energy was great. But what was missing was the person in the team who would say, Gerard, fantastic, that Mount Kilimanjaro. But do you know, I've looked at the map. And on the way to Mount Kilimanjaro, there's a big river. So we might want to take some measures to actually get there. I had only optimists, and you need pessimists as well. Realist. People say this is a great ambition. It's not very likely. So in that dialogue, you sharpen your plan, you get better at it. So great leaders understand where their weaknesses are. That's a part of humility. The word was used. And not humility because it socially sounds great. I'm working today still with leaders who use all these words, but they're not. And what I've learned the hard way, and I coach people on that, you cannot fool folks. If you say, I go into this humble, and people see arrogance shining from your face, doesn't work. And that's where the last piece comes in, authenticity. And I've been inspired by soft-spoken, introverted leaders. Because their insight, their ideas, their perspective on things were so different and opened up my mind. And it was their intensity of their beliefs. It was the way they engaged with me in their own way. It was their struggles sometimes, which is not a part of authenticity. It took me a long time to understand the more open you are about the things you want to learn, back to learning, the things as a leader that you want to get better at. It's so much more likely the people around you will want to help you. And you know what fascinating things happens when you're authentic about your strengths and weaknesses? People not only want to help you, they will help you. Also when you're not looking. And for those people, and I assume there are many that lead big teams, the biggest leadership challenge is always, do people do the right things? Will they push for the right things when you're not watching, when you're not looking, when there's nobody there? And believe me, authentic leadership that has that capacity can do wonders. Does it make sense? So growth, very important. The performance bit, the authenticity, and the collaboration. Now, we thought that was enough when we introduced that. And we said, hey, we got a leadership framework, we called it leadership attributes. We had learning, leadership events connected to it. We start to use the language to promote people, so we were quite chuffed about ourselves. But it's something, we found out something in the global world that was missing as an ingredient. We had, for example, leaders who showed up in a meeting and really behaved very badly towards another member of the team. And I took the person aside after the meeting and said, what did you do there? And it was a he. He said, I was really angry. And I was authentically angry. I thought, shit. And then I started thinking, and I said to him, you were authentically angry. But I think there's an underlying set of beliefs for great leadership. And it starts with something that's called respect for people. It's really important in today's world where ethics and compliance is something that many of our companies are worrying about. My company is worrying about it. Is that when it comes to leaders, you can exhibit all these behaviors. But if you don't have respect for people, you should not be in a leadership role. And I had to take the difficult decision over the last years to take out relatively high-performing leaders because on multiple occasions, they didn't show respect for people. They were bullies. And that comes in many different shapes and forms, and a lot of people manage to hide it very well. They're very pleasant when they walk in my office. They're very pleasant for their peers. But shoot, when you happen to be their PA or driver, you're stuffed. And that's why these people have become my friends. So when it comes to senior leader selections, one of my most important sources of information are PAs and drivers. And my own PA, when it comes to selection of a new person, I love her to actually pick up the people and have a conversation in the elevator, and then it's almost like a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of. It's important. It's important. Because if you care for people, you care for people. It's not something that's negotiable. It's a principle. And then last but not least, because I want to allow at least some time for questions, there's something around resilience. Many of our leaders still today are tired. They're tired because today's world, VUCA world, that is great, is very demanding. The amount of data that is going to present itself on a day-to-day basis is brutal. It's 24 hours, 7 days a week, and people get tired. One of the leadership attributes that we hadn't thought about and is becoming more and more important is going back to real basic. Food, sleep, exercise. Food, sleep, and exercise. And we ask ourselves the question, is the culture that we have in this company one that is commensurate with doing the right things in that space? In many cases, we found we had leaders who were not really living up to these expectations. They were actually proud of the fact that they could do with very little sleep. They were proud of the fact that they had an energy bar in their desk, drawing the energy bar out over lunch. I'm sure nobody in this room would ever do such a thing, but I've learned the hard way it's the wrong thing to do. Great leaders have discipline around sleep as well, because we all need it. And I've seen too many people getting sick. And worse, before they get sick, they start to become far, far less effective. And so in summary, I really believe that there's a very strong correlation between good leadership and the capability of individuals to learn, their desire to learn. And I really believe that in growth and performance with authenticity and collaboration, we have found at least a few components of how great leadership could look like. We've learned that respect for people underpins that. And if you don't have that ingredient, it's hard to get somebody to a 5-minute, 5-hour, 5-day, or 5-month course to learn respect for people. I would call that's rather innate. And then last but not least, if you want to care for others, it's just like in the plane, you have to take care of yourself first. Thank you much.